So, welcome everybody to our office hour for today. As Liz said, I'm Emily Mulford. I'm happy for you guys to join us here today. And also, as she mentioned, this is the second part in our EQuIS EnviroInsite series. And so today I'll be focusing on base maps and layouts. And I'll keep sharing my screen here for a few minutes, and then I'll probably turn it off for the demo. So last week we looked at how to do part one in our series, which was create cross sections. Today we're going to focus on, this is part two, so we're going to be doing the base maps and layouts. And then just to give you guys a little bit of a preview, part three is going to be on Geochemistry Plus next week, and then part four is going to be on strip logs here in a couple of weeks. So the agenda for today, I'm actually going to start essentially from the beginning. So I'm going to show you guys how to connect to EQuIS within EnviroInsite, which is a very quick and simple process. We'll then add some base maps and some shape files to our EnviroInsite maps, and we'll also plot some locations. Then I'll show you how to create and edit layouts, and then I'll show you at the very end how to save layouts as templates for use later. So in terms of EQuIS for EnviroInsite requirements, so you do want to have EQuIS Professional 6.6 ideally installed on your workstation, and also EnviroInsite installed on your workstation. The versions that I have are listed there, so I'm using 6.6 of EQuIS Professional, and I will be connecting to our good old trusty Springfield facility that has some tutorial data in it. And then the version of EnviroInsite that I'm using is our latest and greatest, which is 10.0.0.63. And you do also want .NET Framework installed, ideally the latest and greatest of that too, which I believe is 4.6.2. And I'm using 64-bit versions of everything, so 64-bit versions of Microsoft Office, which actually kind of is needed in the background, EQuIS Professional 64-bit, and EnviroInsite 64-bit, just so you guys have an idea. All of my software that I'm using lines up together, okay? Okay, so just to show you just a few screenshots here really quick in terms of what we're going to see when we get in there. I'll first show you guys how to connect to EQuIS, which is a very simple process. We'll essentially launch EnviroInsite, which I already have open, and then we'll go to the file menus. You can see there on the left, and go to Open Database and then EQuIS Database. The EQuIS login screen will come up, and so I'll simply connect to a facility that way. And then we go through on the right-hand side, we have this EQuIS setup form where we can go through and define certain properties for how we want to connect and plot our data in EnviroInsite. Okay, and then once we connect to EQuIS, we'll go through and you can insert lots of different kinds of maps within EnviroInsite, and I'll talk about some of those options here in a little while. But what we're going to focus on today is one of the newer features within EnviroInsite, which is the ability to add ArcGIS online maps directly to your map. It makes it nice and easy. You can change the zoom level to make things more or less clear as you zoom in and things like that. So I'll show you how to do that. You can also plot, web map services layers. You can plot Bing maps, which I believe does cost a small fee to do that, to connect to the Bing maps. Or you can, plot aerial photos and things like that. So lots of different options in here. So we're going to look at how to insert ArcGIS online maps. Then I'll also show you how to insert shape files. So that's quick and easy to do as well. And you can actually have as many different shape files as you want. In this particular screenshot that I have up on my screen, I think this is 4 or 5 different shape files all laying on top of each other. And so you can have several different ones. I'll probably add 2 to my map when we get in there. And then, once you have everything on, you have your base map, you have your shape files, everything that you want. Typically, I like to plot wells as well before I start doing anything else in EnviroInsite, plot my locations, see where they are, make sure that everything is lining up correctly, get some labels going in there, and then you can zoom in, zoom out to desired area on your map. So we'll do that also. Okay. And then the last thing, the last main thing I should say, is creating layouts. So I'll show you guys how to take essentially our model view and turn it into a layout. And we can add all kinds of things. We can add scales and title bars and north arrows like you guys see there, and dates and all kinds of great stuff. And it's really, really simple to do. So that'll be the last step in our process there. Okay. So I'm essentially going to show you guys now what I just described in that series of screenshots. So launch EnviroInsite, connect to an EQuIS facility. We'll adjust the view options. That's actually a fairly important piece of this. So I'll show you guys how to do that, and we'll plot ArcGIS online maps. I'll add a couple of shapefiles. I'll plot and label my locations, and then we'll create and edit a layout or two. Okay. All right, so for this demonstration part of it, I'm going to go ahead and turn my webcam off so you guys can see EnviroInsite here full screen. And as I mentioned, I already have it open. Okay, so I'll let that pull up here for a second. And open database. And then what we want to do is connect, in this case, to an EQuIS database. Okay, so just single click there. That opens up my EQuIS login screen. So it's very much the same exact login screen that you would see from EQuIS Professional or Sample Planning module. You notice that even my favorites are remembered, so it's all the same code and everything. So if I wanted to get into Springfield, that's actually this favorite here. The MPF stands for Metal Plating Facilities. So I could launch my favorite, or I could go into the long way, go into my connection, my database. And then I actually have it in this North America facility group, and I could find Springfield and go ahead and launch it. Okay, when you connect to an EQuIS database, okay, you get this form that comes up here where you can choose or where you can review, I should say, we already chose on the login screen, but where you can review your facility properties so you can see what cord type code you're going to be dealing with. This is all coming from EQuIS. Your facility code, your facility ID, your identifier, your LEV unit, all that sort of stuff. And then you can go through and choose some of these other items, modify them. The defaults are often fine, but if you wanted to change things, you certainly could do that. So for example, on data mapping, if I don't want to use a non-detect multiplier with some of my spider diagrams or something that I might be creating, I can turn off my non-detect multiplier simply by changing that to 1. Okay, for my when I'm dealing with water levels, this can calculate water levels in much the same way that our water levels report within EQuIS Professional can. So I could choose, how I want to display my water levels, if I want to calculate those, or just pull them straight from DT water level, LEV, or something along those lines. Okay, so lots of different options in here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through these ad nauseum, but lots of different things we can change. We can choose which data qualifier field of, there's 4 different qualifier fields where we store qualifiers in EQuIS. We could choose which one we want to emphasize in EnviroInsite. We could choose what we want to use for our location ID, whether we want to use syslop code or loc name, or maybe our well ID or something like that. Okay, so lots of different things. There's several tabs in here. We could choose, define what we want to use if we're doing sample interval horizons, if we're doing displaying well construction information. So all of this stuff is coming from EQuIS, and we can basically choose which values we want to use in EnviroInsite and which ones we just kind of want to ignore for the time being. Okay, default units, if this is populated, you can set that as well. So all I did is back on data mapping, I just changed my non-detect multiplier. That was pretty much it. And now I'm just going to select OK. Okay, and if you guys see here down at the bottom of my screen, down in my output log here in my work log, this tells me that I'm connected to the EQuIS database. If there were any issues connecting, my output log would also show me that down here. So this actually has a whole slew of great and helpful information in here that we can potentially use if we, are running into any unexpected behavior or anything like that in EnviroInsite. Okay. All right, so I connected to EQuIS, but obviously we don't see anything exciting on the map yet. So the next step is You can plot your locations first, but I often like to put on my base map and things like that first, just as a little bit easier to kind of build from the ground up. So before I do that, I want to just go up to my view menu and I want to go to options. And this is actually extremely important. You want to make sure that your UTM, so in this case, I am plotting things in UTM. So you want to make sure that your UTM longitude zone is set to the correct zone. So in Springfield, I am in UTM 17 North. So I want to make sure that I'm pointing to the correct UTM longitude zone here, okay? If you are doing things in state plane, you would want to do the same thing here. You'd want to point to the appropriate state plane zone. And so you could just change any of these things in your document, but you definitely want to make sure you do this, especially if you're pulling in a map from an online source or something, so it pulls it from the right spot. Okay, the other thing that you may want to do is make sure that this little option here is set to the appropriate coordinate system. So you could either use a local coordinate system, maybe if you were just plotting some stuff but not planning on putting in a map, or you could, choose UTM or state plane or OSG or something like that, OSGB, okay? So you can choose which coordinate system you just want to make sure all of these different things line up appropriately so that your base map winds up in the right spot, okay? Then once you're ready to go, you just come up to Insert. And as you see here on my Insert menu, there's several different options. So you can simply insert an aerial image if you wanted to, or a CAD drawing if you had one. Or as I mentioned, you could do web map service or Bing Maps, so for blanking files. There's tons of different things we could insert in here. What we're going to do for now is do an ArcGIS online map. And so if I click on this, this is simply going to give me, or ask me, I should say, to define my options in here. So by default, the zoom level is 16, and I might change this here in a minute so you guys can see what a different zoom level might look like. I can also define my style. So I have world imagery, the topographic, or the street. So I'll do the imagery for now, but I'll show you guys a couple of those other examples here in a moment. You can choose where you want your rectangle of your map to go. So you could either draw a rectangle or you could adjust these coordinates manually if you wanted. I'm just going to leave everything as default and then select OK. Okay, and just like that, my base map comes in pretty quick and simple. Okay, if I wanted to make changes to it, I could always delete this from the plot control and redraw this map, or I could come over to the far left-hand corner and I could make a couple of changes. For example, I could change my map style from world imagery to, if I wanted to see the topographic instead, I would say select world topo and then apply. And that gives you an idea here when that comes up of what the topographic layer looks like, okay? I like that imagery one a little bit better, so I'll go ahead and switch back, but it's really easy to do that just within these properties over here in the far right-hand corner. So I'm gonna switch back to world imagery and apply. That's probably has my topo on the top there, so I'll fix that here in a second. Okay, I can also double click on my ArcGIS world layer in the plot control. Okay, and this will also allow me to change the zoom level. So you see my zoom level is set to 16 by default. If I increase this, so going up one level actually adds quite a bit to this. Okay, so I'm doing a zoom level of 17. It does take a few seconds. And that's because it's basically redrawing this with quite a few more pixels in it for each zoom level. So there we go. Now it's showing up with my world imagery. Okay, so if I zoom in now, just by scrolling, or I can click on my little plus here, the better or the higher my zoom level is, and I think it goes up to 20. The higher my zoom level is, the better these images will look as I zoom in. But of course, it takes longer to draw them because it's adding a lot more pixels for each zoom level. Okay, so you can play with that and take a look at it and see what you can get there. Okay, let me make this a little bit smaller here so we can see my map. There we go. And so if I want to insert a couple of shape files, I can do that very easily as well. Again, I just go up to Insert and then Shapefile. And so then I can browse to the specific shapefile that I want to insert. So I can just click my little folder there. And I actually have some UTM Springfield shapefiles set up and ready to go. So if I wanted to insert my roads, for example, I would just choose the shapefile, hit open. Especially if we're going to do anything in 3D, which we can do in EnviroInsite, I usually like to select the drape on surface to make sure that it'll do that properly for me. You can change the format, do other things. I usually like to come into crop, and I'll say crop to rectangle. Okay, and I can say clip shapes at rectangle, and it'll define a rectangle for me. Or if I want to draw that myself, I can select draw. It'll give me this cursor. Okay, and then if I want to draw it just over this space, I can do that, and then select OK. Okay, so now it's probably hard to see with my map turned on. Okay, so now it draws that shapefile for me only across that specific rectangle that I'm looking at. Okay, and I can do the same thing. I'll just do one more here just for fun. So it added a legend here for me. I could delete that legend if I didn't need that or wanted that out of the way. But then I can do an insert shapefile, and I'll choose one more from that list. I'll just add my hydrology in here. Okay, drape on surface. I could do the same kind of thing, crop, or maybe I draw a slightly different rectangle. Okay, maybe I just want my hydrology just on this portion or something. Hit OK. Okay, and if I turn off these other two layers in my plot control, just so you guys can see that. So my hydrology adds a little bit. There's not a ton in this particular shapefile, but it does add some. Okay. Right, pretty easy. Okay, so I can delete these legends just by clicking on the legend and hitting delete on my keyboard, just to get rid of them and clean them up. Okay. So the last part in my model view that I wanted to show you guys is how to plot locations. And Bill already had some locations plotted when he did the office hour on cross sections last time. And so I want to show you how to actually do that now. So if we go up to plot and then 2D data, okay, we're just going to stick to 2D for now. The very first one on our list here is locations. So I can modify this query if I only wanted to plot specific locations coming from my EQuIS facility, I could do that. Otherwise, if I leave these % signs, it acts as a wildcard and it'll essentially plot all of my locations. So that seems fine. If I want to see all my locations from Springfield, that's no problem. Under labels, you could choose whether you want to plot your labels or not. I often like to change things like the label color. I'll do something a little bit brighter here. Label color, I might change the label height, make these a little bit bigger. So I might change that to say 10. You could change your mask, which is the background, just to make your labels stand out a little bit more so you can see them on your Basemap. You can go to options, and this is where you can change the symbol of your locations. You can change the color. So if I want to up that radius to say 6, make those bigger, I could do that. Change my fill color. Maybe I want these to be, I don't know, I'll do that purple I was thinking about earlier. Okay. In your legend, you could change, by default, it calls these wells, but if you wanted to simply say this is locations or stations or something else, you could do that. And then in format, okay, you can choose for your labels, you can choose to optimize the location of those labels, and EQuIS will do its best, or EnviroInsite, excuse me, will do its best to not plot labels on top of each other. If it does, though, we can still adjust those. And then last, if we wanted to plot just a specific subset based on location group, we could do that. We could, and at the bottom, you see it here, it says leave all unchecked to not filter on location group. So if I want to see everything, I just don't worry about messing with this tab. So then I just select OK. And now all of my wells for Springfield will plot here. And there's not too many. I think I have something like 44 locations or something like that in here. So it's drawing my labels, drawing my wells. Okay, and there it goes. So if I ever wanted to adjust these, if I decide, maybe purple for my well symbols is not the way to go or anything like that, I can just double click on the plot control, okay, and that'll open back up this same options window here for me. Okay, my data is also displayed down below. And with these labels, one of the really nice things about this is if I needed to adjust any of these labels, I could simply grab a label and move it around to adjust it. And get it out of my way here, right? Okay, so pretty quick and easy to do that. So the last step in our process here then is to create a layout. So let's say we have everything plotted on our map that we want, and we want to create a layout, kind of produce something that's a little bit more presentation ready or print ready, and more nicely formatted. There's a couple of different ways to do it to create a new layout, but I usually just come up to our layouts menu up here and I select new. And then what it does, I don't know if you guys can see this very well on my screen, but this gives me a little cursor here, little crosshairs, and I can say what area I want to create the layout over. So if I was only interested in my B locations, I didn't care about all my SBs up at the top there, I could draw a rectangle just around my Bs if I wanted. Okay. And then what it does is it takes me to, well, my rectangle wasn't as good as I wanted, but it takes me to the layout tab. So I still have both down here in the bottom left-hand corner. I have my model and then I have my layout. And from the same model, I could create multiple layouts if I wanted to as well. I don't necessarily need to have just one. Okay, but this enables me to now format essentially all of the stuff around this and make changes. And, I can change my subtitle, my titles, I can add a bunch of things in here. Okay, so pretty easy to do this as well. To change the properties of this particular layout, if maybe I'm not crazy about the way it drew it or I want to change the orientation or anything like that, I can just go up to Edit and then Layout Props, Layout Properties here. And I can say maybe I want this instead of landscape, I'd rather this be portrait, and I want my title block on the bottom. And you can change your margins. Maybe for your titles, this is where you see this says title here. Maybe this is going to be figure 1, and I have some subtitles. I could change, if I want this to be bold. For my subtitles, maybe I say, metal plating facilities, assuming I can type today. And subtitle 2, I don't know, maybe I say, I put my name in there or something like that. And then you can choose the alignment. And you can always make these changes a couple at a time instead of doing a ton of things all at once. Make a couple of changes, see what it looks like, and then come back to the layout properties to make more. In options, you can even change the layout name. So if I wanted to call my layout name figure 1, so I knew what I was talking about, I could do that. All kinds of different options in here. I could set the plan view. So if I wanted to adjust this, redraw my rectangle at all, anything like that, I could do that in here. Okay. And then 3D view, which we're not dealing with at the moment. Okay. Once this is ready to go, I just select OK. And so you see here, this changes it, changes my orientation, puts my title block now at the bottom. Scroll, I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this. So just depending on what I want this to look like, I changed my alignment to center on my titles and things like that. Okay, I can also add plenty of other things in here that I want to include in my map, right? It's not a map if you don't have a scale and a north arrow and that sort of thing. So to insert those things, I actually just come up to where it says draw in my layout view. And you see I have lots of different options in here, but these two at the bottom, north arrow and scale, are usually the two that I put in there probably the earliest. So if I wanted to add my north arrow, there's a couple of different styles to choose from. You could define the width and the height and all that sort of stuff. You could define the color. So let's say I wanted this in my map. So maybe I set it to something, orange so you can actually see it. Okay, so I can put this, in my map, or I can drag and put it in my title block or whatever I want to do. Okay. And I can do the same thing if I draw. I could add a scale. Okay, this scale is based on the rectangle that you've currently drawn. So you may have to redo your scale if you redraw your rectangle and you're zoomed in more or something like that. It doesn't automatically adjust that. But the scale is based on whatever zoom level we have in here. And its display units, it's smart enough to pick up that we plotted this stuff in meters. If we wanted to change it to feet, we could switch that and then it would do the conversion for us. Okay, we can change the format of our scale. So we can do things like change the color of the text and all kinds of good stuff in here. Okay, I'll make that's bold, that's fine. And then the style, this very first tab, I could choose the style of this. I could define the number of segments. Let's say I want 5 segments, but I want this to be 500 meters instead of just 100 meters. Let's see what that looks like. So I hit OK. And you see here that what that does is it gives me, let's zoom in a little bit more here. Okay, so says here's 500 meters, and it gives me my 5 segments, technically, well, 5 segments, 6 little numbers there. Okay, so pretty easy to change that as well. And if I needed to make changes to this, I just double click on it, and then I could come back in here and tweak it. Okay. So let me zoom back out just so we can see this a little bit better. Maybe I'll put my north arrow over here or something crazy. Okay. So I can also do other things like draw. I can add just the date. I can add the file name, or if I wanted to just do text, either regular text or like multi-line text. You know, I could add other kinds of text in here if I wanted. So if I want to do multi-line text, draw my box where I want it and say, you know, this is the best layout ever, or whatever I wanted to do here, I could do that. Okay, I could choose whether it's movable, again, choose format stuff. And so then that adds the text, and then I could move this around and put this somewhere else. Okay. Okay, so once I go through and I sort of painstakingly set up this layout, one of the really nice things about this is that I can save the layout itself as a template. So I don't necessarily, if I wanted to use a similar layout for several different maps or several different figures or models or something like that, I could absolutely do that. And so I would just come up to File and Template and then Save. Okay, and what it's going to do is it's going to save this template or this layout that I've created. It's going to save the template as an XML file, and then I can essentially load that template for the next layout that I create. So, you know, I'll just say Figure 1 layout. Okay, I'll put this on my desktop. Okay, so I saved that. So if I go back to my model, and let's say I want to create a new layout. So I'll go up to Layouts, New. Okay, I'll draw a different rectangle. Maybe I'll zoom out a little bit. Okay, why not? I can then come up to File, Template, Open. Choose my Figure 1 layout. Okay, and it automatically applies this to my new layout that I have here. So of course, if this was Figure 2, then you know I'd want to tweak a few things. But this makes it really quick and easy once I've defined the layouts that I want to use to just apply those to whatever new layout that I happen to have. Okay. All right, so that's more or less what I wanted to show you guys today. I don't think, so more or less like this, I did something a little bit different in our demo. You know, this one here, I kept it in orientation, or I kept the orientation in the landscape view. I have a little bit of a different scale down there at the bottom, different style of a north arrow. I added the date on this one up at the top there, but a very, very similar concept. Okay, I created this one in probably the same amount of time as I did the one that I just showed you guys. Okay. All right, so that's more or less just the basics of, you know, plotting locations, connecting to EQuIS, doing, you know, adding base maps and shape files, and then creating layouts. It's very quick and simple. One of the things that I really like about EnviroInsite is once you learn how to do one or two things, you know, these patterns emerge and it becomes really simple and intuitive to make changes or to do just about anything you want to do. But all of that being said here, let's see what kind of questions we have. I'll turn my webcam back on just so you guys can see me thinking about stuff. Okay, there we go. And Liz, I haven't taken a look at any of these questions yet. Do you have anything specific that I should start with?
Yeah, it looks like we've got a couple of hands up and a few questions. Catherine at first wasn't able to see the ArcGIS online map as an option in the insert drop-down menu, but she messed around with a couple of settings and then was able to get it to show up, specifically unchecking the lat-long coordinates box in the form set box, and then the web map service was then an option. But I told her I would follow up with our development team to make sure that, you know, there's not an additional setting that we're missing.
Great. And I know that ArcGIS online map option that I was showing is a pretty new option as well. So depending on what version of EnviroInsite you have installed, you may only have partial functionality or something like that. So if you try playing around with it and it's not functioning the way I showed you, you know, let us know, tell us what version you have. And actually, you guys are wondering, how do I figure out what version I have? Let me just show you really quick. If I go back to my model, actually I didn't have to do that, but in EnviroInsite, you can just go up to Help and then About EnviroInsite, and that'll tell you in here which specific version you have installed. Because I know there are several iterations of it. EnviroInsite isn't quite on the same release cycle that EQuIS is. And so anyway, it's good to double check the version and make sure that you have like 10.0.0. I think at least 6.2. They might be available in earlier versions, but and if you don't have that, just let us know and we can hook you up with that. Okay. Okay. So next one, what do we got?
Another question from Catherine asking, where can I look up UTM longitude zone and state plane zone for my site to ensure that my information is correct in the View Options document tab?
That's a good question. One of the places that I'll often look for that is in, if I'm not sure, like if my ArcGIS guys, for example, or somebody else is more familiar with the coordinates of my site, the very first place I'll probably look for that is actually in EQuIS itself. So let me just launch EQuIS Professional here while we're talking. And so I might check, again, if I'm not, you know, familiar with what the coordinate system is supposed to be. Let's see, hold on, I have too many things open because of these webcams. Oh, there we go. Helps if I pick the right facility here. But I might take a look at my RT coord type. Well, I might look at the coordinates themselves to see what coordinate system is being used in EQuIS. And so I'd probably check the DT coordinate table first and foremost. Okay, so data tables, if you guys can see this, okay, it's kind of small, and then DT coordinate, and see what coordinate system is being used in EQuIS, and I can compare if I have several different coordinate systems, compare what's being used in my toolbar down below here. Okay, so mine says UTM 17 north, which essentially means that I'm seeing this set of coordinates if I filter in my map. Now, depending on how folks have defined their coord type codes, this might not be as obvious as, oh, it's obviously UTM 17 north because this is controlled in the RT coord type table. So that might be the next place I would look if I'm not sure. If I say, no, I'm using UTM, but I'm not sure what zone or something like that. You can check your reference tables as well. So, and then RT coord type. And in here, you can take a look at these. Okay, and so UTM 17 north, probably one of the things that will be populated is this ESRI spatial reference. And this can be helpful if, you know, let's say this was just called UTM, it wasn't well defined as 17 north. Your ESRI spatial reference, if this field is populated, will probably give it away. It'll probably say something in here about the zone that's being used or something along those lines, okay? Now, of course, that's also, again, assuming that this big long thing here is populated. If not, you can Google it if you know, hey, I'm using UTM 17, or I'm using UTM, but I don't know what zone exactly it's in. You can actually just Google that stuff and look that up fairly easily. I've actually done that on many occasions as well. But it just sort of depends to what extent it's already been populated in EQuIS and things like that. But that's more or less the process that I would go through.
And I suppose now is as good a time as any to plug the coordinate converter form that's also available in EQuIS. So if you need to convert your coordinates for whatever reason, you just access that via the forms section in EQuIS Professional. So
thanks. Good call, Liz. Okay, and we do, I think, have a previous office hour on that coordinate converter form as well. Did you already pop a link in there? If not, we'll send it to you guys to follow up with the recording and everything as well. Oh, Dan, that's a great question. So Dan asks, is there an option to open more than one facility? And actually, Dan, I don't know the answer to that, but why don't we try it and see what happens? So in EQuIS Professional, in order to open up one or more facility, you essentially log into a facility group instead of logging into an individual facility. Let's try it in here and see what happens. I honestly don't know the answer to this off the top of my head. So if I want to, actually, I'm just going to close this and completely launch fresh just because I don't want it to, no. So you guys get a little bit of extra random things with me today here. Okay. So I'll launch EnviroInsite again. I just have it on my toolbar. Ah, all right. And I'm clicking too many times. So if I was connecting to the EQuIS database, and if I wanted to connect to more than one facility, let me give it a shot here. So I go up to File, and then Open Database, EQuIS Database. And so this gives me the login screen. And so normally what I would do in EQuIS Professional is if I wanted to log into a facility group, meaning all of the facilities within that group, I would just come. So I do have a facility group in here, this North America one. And what I would do in Professional is I'd right click on this and select Open Facility. So let's try it here and see if it'll actually connect to. Now these are all in different coordinate systems. So in real life, you would want to make sure that they're all in the same coordinate system in order to get them to map nicely. But let's see if it'll let us connect. So if I do Open Facility for North America, which is actually my facility group. Yeah, that's fine. I already did that. So it does say it's connected. If you see down here though, so it does let me connect, but you see here it says no records found, check consistency of cord type code and identifier and DT facility and DT coordinate. I know at least 2 of the facilities that are in that group. Gold King Mine is in Lat Long, at least at the moment, whereas Springfield's in UTM. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there, which is probably why it's giving me this message. But in real life, if they were all pointing to the same coordinate system and identifier, it looks like yes, you would be able to. And I can confirm that for us, Dan, just to make doubly sure, but it looks like that functionality is in there. Oh, and then Dan's other question was, when you duplicated figure 1 in figure 2 with a different rectangle, this would require correcting the scale. Correct? And the short answer is yes. So yeah, if I imported that template, but I had a different rectangle like we saw, then yeah, I would probably want to redraw that scale to make sure that it's correct. Because if I had zoomed in, actually I did zoom out, I think, on that figure 2 before I created it. And so because I zoomed out, yeah, I would want to redraw that scale to make sure it's in the right right scale.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. That's a great question as well.
But if you have any questions, future topic suggestions, or want anything else from the Office Hours group, you can email us at officehours@earthsoft.com. We hope to see you next week, and thanks a lot, everybody, for your attendance today.